Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get through. It's the weekend before the draft. By this time next week, we'll be talking about who the Cleveland Browns have drafted, what they've added to this team. It's going to be very exciting. But before we get there, we have to ask some questions about what the Browns are going to do. Kilo says, hey, Q, love the content. If next year's draft is like this year's draft in the sense that the quarterback prospects are overhyped and not actually that great, how do you think the Browns will go about solving the quarterback problem? This is assuming Kenny Pickett becomes nothing more than a backup like everybody predicts him to be. So here's the interesting thing about next year's quarterback class and the position the Browns are in. I've maintained this, right? If you're going to pick a quarterback in 2025, you have to be okay with not picking a quarterback in 2026. Like, there's no reality where you take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds this year and then you take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds next year, unless you end up in a situation where, like, you get the number 1 overall pick or something like that, right? And there's like a no-brainer guy, right? Like, let's say if you drafted Jimmy Clausen, right, and Cam Newton comes out in the next draft and you get the number 1 overall pick, you're going to do that, right? So that's not going to stop you from taking a Cam Newton-like prospect, let's say Lenore Sellers, for just purposes, or Drew Aller, whoever you want to throw in there, becomes that kind of a prospect over the course of the next college football season, then they will take a quarterback, right? If they get like the number one pick overall situation. But outside of that very unlikely situation, the Browns have to make the decision, hey, if we take a quarterback, pick 67, pick 33, you're giving that at least more than 1 year of starts for that guy to figure out what he is, right? You're going to invest that much in him. So definitely got to evaluate these quarterback classes. Now, if it falls like your scenario where the 2026 class isn't as great, right? Cade Klubnik doesn't build off of what he did last year. Lenore Sellers has a bit of a step back. Here's another thing to consider, right? A lot of what makes me excited about the 2026 class potentially is the guys who could come out that are like 21, right? Lenore Sellers. A lot of people are still amped up about Arch Manning. We don't know what Arch Manning looks like right now. I'm at the point to give him a season, but Arch Manning, right? Potentially, Nika Imalava was like a 5-star prospect. I know a lot of people are just shitting on him now because of the whole NIL thing, but still somebody who, if he puts it together, he's 6'6", he has a great arm, great athlete. You can easily see him becoming a top-tier prospect, especially if he puts together a great year at the Big Ten level. So, like, there's a lot of guys who could bolster this class that are like 21 years old if they have a really, really good season next year. And that's what's going to make or break the class, because other than that, we're talking about Drew Aller, we're talking about Cade Klubnik. And while I like Drew Aller and I like Cade Klubnik, those aren't like guys who have the potential to become no-brainer number 1 or number 2 quarterbacks, like in the way that like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Drake May were, right? Like, those guys are going to be the 21-year-olds. So if, let's say, we live in a world where those guys show progress, the 21-year-olds, but they don't come out, right? Arch Manning has a good year, doesn't come out. Nico Imaliva has a good year, doesn't come out. Who else is there, right? There's a kid at Michigan State. There's a kid at Pitt that's pretty good. That could come out, might not come out, right? Lenore Sellers. And that pushes all those quarterbacks to 2027. And then you also have that being like the Dylan Raiola year, the DJ Lagway year. It pushes everything into 2027. So if you're the Browns, you have to look at these classes and say, okay, I'm fine betting on 2025, missing out on 2026, and shooting back at 2027. Because of the 3 years, 2027 is the best year to bet on as far as quarterback talent goes, right? Because you could have, Lenore Sellers in that draft class as well, right? So that is what I think is going to be interesting about this. With NIL, these guys are more likely to stay longer. So if this class looks like a lot of it's going to push into 2026, and if you are anticipating that these guys aren't going to follow the old college rules where guys come out as fast as possible to the draft, somebody like Arch Manning's definitely going to stay that extra year. So you want to just you see if you push it back to 2027, and that might make taking a swing at quarterback this year make a lot more sense, because then you'll miss out on 2026, but you get to go in on 2027. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think the Browns are looking at it as a 3-year window thing. I think they're looking at the 2025 class, the 2026 class, and the 2027 class. And they're saying by the time they start the 2027 season, they want to have somebody they feel like can be the next franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns by then. Right? Whatever class they get them of the 3, I don't know, but I think they're giving it these next 3 draft classes to figure out whether that means taking a chance on somebody this year, seeing if that works out over the course of the next 2 years. And then if you get to 2027, you need a quarterback that looks like it's going to be one of the deeper quarterback classes in recent memory, then you go in on that one, right? So that's going to be there. And, that's what's hard to predict right now, because the college football landscape is changing rapidly. Guys are staying in college longer than they've ever had because they're actually being compensated to play in college, especially at the quarterback position. There's more incentive to stay in college. There's more incentive to use up all of your eligibility, which means you just can't count on guys coming out their junior year as much as you used to. And a lot of the 2026 class is relying on guys to come out their junior year. So that's something the Browns have to factor in about whether they want to take a chance this year or next year on a quarterback. Because if you take a chance in 2026, you're out on 2027. And that's the year where I'm like, I don't know if you'll want to miss out here, right? Because Lagway looks like he's definitely coming out 2027. He's already played a full year at Florida, and he is a hell of a prospect already. Dylan Raiola is definitely planning to come out 2027, right? He's starting his freshman year. Like, the guys who are going to play 3 years of football by the time they get to 2027, they're going to want to go pro. The guys who haven't, which is like Lenoris has only played 1 year of football. Well, so he's going to want to probably get that 3rd year in, whether it's this year or next year. And the same thing is true with Arch Manning, who's going to at least want 2 seasons under his belt before he goes pro. So that all points to 2027 being the year. And if that means you take a chance here, bide your time, see what happens. And then if that works out, cool. You don't have to draft the quarterback in 2027. But if it doesn't work out, then you're going to land at a quarterback draft class that projects to be reasonably deep. And if it's a deep class, that means your ability to maneuver to get the pick that you want or the quarterback that you want will be a lot more likely, because the class has a lot more quarterback prospects. And, 2027 could be a monster. Like, Dylan Raiola was anointed coming out of high school, #1 overall pick. People are already anointing DJ Lagway as the #1 overall pick of 2027. People have been saying if Arch Manning can walk and chew bubblegum, people are going to say he's the #1 overall pick. That's 3 guys right now, right? Lenore Sellers is incredibly talented. Like, he could be in that conversation as well. There's so many guys who could be in that class. Darian Manley, right? He just transferred to Duke, really good his freshman year at Tulane. There's a lot of guys who could be in that 2027 class and make you go, okay, that might be the year. And I wonder if the Browns are thinking that's the case as well. And if they think that, then it makes sense that they would take a chance on a younger guy this year. And everything they're doing makes me feel like they're going to swing at somebody at either 33 or 67 at quarterback. Appreciate the question, though, Kilo. Next question, Matt Lerner says, if Tennessee doesn't take Cam Ward, does that leave us in a bit of a bind? I don't think so, but my opinion of Cam Ward isn't as high as everybody else's. If it's me personally, I see no reason to take Cam Ward at 2. Cam Ward's not really in my consideration pool for the #2 overall pick. I don't think he's that much better of a prospect than what you could get at 33, right? I don't see it. I don't get it with Cam. I understand that people feel way differently about Cam Ward than I do, but he's a quarterback prospect that I would have no problem passing up on. Do the Browns feel that way? I'm not sure, but I don't think it leaves you in a bind. Either you like Cam Ward a lot and you take him at 2, or you don't like Cam Ward and you move on business as usual. You know, it doesn't really leave you in a bind. You don't have to take Cam Ward if you don't want to take Cam Ward. You know, people are just going to be mad at you on the internet for a couple of months about it. But if Cam Ward goes somewhere and doesn't play good, then it's not really going to matter in the long run. So if you don't have a high evaluation of the kid, you don't have to take him, right? Just because everybody thinks you should. You don't got to do it. So, you know, that's where I'm at. I don't get it. Like, I just don't get the Cam Ward fascination with a lot of people. And I've watched a ton. I've seen Cam Ward play in person. I've watched like 8 of his games, all 22. I don't get it. But, you know, that's just my evaluation. That's why it wouldn't be complicated for me. I don't know where the Browns feel about him, but based on how they feel, it's not going to be complicated. It's just, do you like him at 2 or do you not? You know, you should have that decision made up. And this goes into what I've been saying all year. The Browns should absolutely do everything they can to evaluate all of these quarterbacks. All the visits they can do, all the extra shit, do it. Like, I'm glad they brought in Tyler Shuck on a top 30 visit, because figure out everything you need to know about every quarterback in this class. Because if you're going to pass on a quarterback, you need to be as sure about passing on a quarterback at 2 than you need to be about taking a quarterback at 2, right? Like, you need to be absolutely sure this is not somebody who could be a franchise guy for you. And if you make that determination and you're confident in it because you've done the work, I'm fine with passing on the quarterback. But if you feel the opposite way, right, and you're confident in it because of the work, then okay, do it. But, you know, they should have done enough work. And from what we see from the outside looking in, they've done enough work so it wouldn't put them in a bind. It would just be like, hey, do you value Cam Ward this high? They have to have thought about it. You know, it would be malpractice if they didn't think about it. PB Bears 99 says, hey, Q, would you take Hunter over Carter because of the possibility of being able to draft Sanders late in the round via trade up? Was their connection they made with each other better? Or no, it doesn't. I don't care about the connection between Shedeur and Travis Hunter. That's not why I would draft Travis, because I'd be confident that Travis can have a special connection with somebody else at quarterback, because Travis is really good at wide receiver. So no, that doesn't factor in at all. Not even a milligram of factor should be paid to that about if you could pair him up with Shedeur. I don't think Shedeur uniquely makes Travis Hunter like a much more interesting player. It would be a cool story. It would be a fun PR thing, but Travis Hunter is worth taking on his own merit. You know, I don't think you factor in whether you get Shedeur as a consideration there. You know what I mean? You got to make that decision based on how you feel about Travis and how you feel about Abdul. And if you feel better about Travis, then make the pick for Travis. But if you're like, well, I like Abdul better, but, you know, maybe we can pair Travis with Shedeur, that's malpractice. You shouldn't be making decisions like that if you're the Browns. You know, and I don't think it will. I think they love Travis. That's the vibe I'm getting from Berea, or at least the vibe they're putting out, that they love Travis Hunter. Iceman, the boss, says AB in his pre-draft presser said they're looking for 2 classes at a time, especially for quarterback. With that in mind, is it possible that AB and the organization might see someone as more potential next year? How would this affect the draft if so? It might be, right? Like, if the Browns decide to completely pass on quarterback this year, they're really betting on that 2026 class. If they take a quarterback this year, they're betting against the 2026 class. And look, that 2026 class, what is going to bring that class over the top from what this class is, right? Because right now, the guys that we know will come out are like Drew Aller and Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier. Those guys are not much different than the top 3 in this year's draft, right? I would say Cade's probably the best bet out of those. So he would be the Cam Ward, right? The number 1 prospect in that class. Drew Aller would be the upside guy, the Milro equivalent. And then Garrett Nussmeier would be the Shedeur Sanders equivalent, right? The really good college player, but you don't know if those skills are going to project cleanly to the NFL. my whole point is, right now as it stands, if you just look at the guys who have to come out in that 2026 class, it's not much different than this year. What puts the 2026 class potentially over the top is all of the extras that could come out in that class, right? The Lenore Sellers of the world, the Arch Mannings of the world, depending on how you feel about Nico Imalava, he could come out in that class, right? Who else is in this draft class? There's a lot of juniors there are a lot of players who are turning to their junior year this year that can massively flip what their draft prospects look like. It's a question of if they come out or not. And I think that's the question with the 2026 class. How much are you willing to bet that NIL keeps these guys in college longer? And I think if I were the Browns, I would probably bet on NIL keeping guys in college longer because, the main motivation to come out early in college was that you can make $20 million if you jump to the NFL right now. But if you are a college athlete, depending on what school you want to transfer to, you can cash out and get the $20 million if you want it. At the very least, you can get $5 or $4 million, right, at the quarterback position, even just to stay at the school that you're at. And the reason that's important, right, even though $4 million is not the 20 you can get from jumping, like the number might not be bigger, but having $4 million, I would not know from experience because I don't have anywhere close to $1 million. But I would imagine that having $1 million would make it so that you're willing to play things out in college a little bit longer, right? And play out your college career because the need for that money is just not going to be extreme. Like the difference between being a broke college kid living off of cost of living allowance in your scholarship fund, which is like, maybe $20,000 to getting $20 million is massive. The difference between going from $4 to $5 million in college to $20 million in the NFL, not as massive, not as life-changing. You see what I mean? So the onus to jump early is just not there. And then you're talking about a kid like Arch Manning, who really has no incentive to leave early. He's going to be like, if he go walk and chew bubblegum for a year at Texas or 2 years at Texas, he's going to be the number one overall pick of any draft class he enters because of his last name. And he's a Manning. He has money. He's going to have a ton of NIL money because he's a Manning. Even if that was a factor in the money he's going to get in the NFL, it's not really going to convince him to jump early. So that's why I say I'm not 100% sure betting on that 2026 class seems to be the good idea that I thought it was maybe earlier, because like the more I think about NIL, the more I'm like, these guys are going to stay. And if they stay, like Drew Aller, he's good. I like Drew Aller. I've done a film breakdown on Drew Aller, but like, I'm probably going to be hesitant about having to take Drew Aller in the top 10 of next year's draft, right? The same thing could be said with like Cade, even though I like Cade a lot more than I like Cam Ward. But Cade might be the first quarterback taken. I don't know if the Browns are going to be in a position to take the first quarterback taken. All of this adds up to, if you are betting on NIL keeping these guys in, then it makes sense to draft the quarterback this year because you want to have as much information about the guy you draft within the next 2 years before you get to that 2027 class, where there's a lot of guys who could be in that class that can be interesting, for sure. And that's just the guys we know, right? This is college football, right? Joe Burrow kind of blew up out of nowhere. Nobody really thought about Joe Burrow being the number one overall pick in 2021 back in 2019. Or no, he wasn't the number one overall pick. Nobody thought about Joe Burrow being the number one overall pick in the 2020 draft in like 2018. Nobody was he was a backup at Ohio State. So there's also room for guys who are going to get the opportunity to play over the next 2 seasons that could also be in that 2027 class, or guys who are playing right now that make a massive leap in improvement. And so that baseline for 2027 being that strong already, like 3 years out, it just, if you're reading the roots in the soil for what class is gonna bear the most fruit at quarterback, 2027 looks a lot richer than everything else. So yeah, I think if they're looking at these classes and they're like, oh, well, this guy could be 2026 for a lot of the guys they like, then you got to consider going to 2027. And you don't want to just be quarterbackless for the next 2 years. So take a chance on somebody this year. Give yourself the chance to take somebody over there at the 2027 draft. All right, Dion Scott says, great work over here, Q. I'm loving all the pre-draft content. I'd be fine with Carter or Hunter at 2. So my question is, if the Browns don't go Carter at 2, are we rolling out Maguire, Obo, and Wright again? Are there edges worth going after in the later rounds? Not edges that I think can start day one. The defensive line, is hard to find day one starters on the D-line because it's just such a tough position to mature to. Usually you're talking about guys having to pick up weight before you go there. So if you don't draft Carter, maybe you're looking at bringing back Zadarius Smith. Maybe you're looking at expanding the role of Isaiah Maguire or expanding the role of Alex. But yeah, I think it's going to be a bit awkward at that opposite edge position because you don't go after Carter, But I think that's something that they can live with. Scott Wilkes says, even though I see the Browns drafting a running back, do you think the Browns would be willing to give Chubb a similar contract to what he got last year? I'm with you in that he's so valuable to this team. I'd be super disappointed that they let a fan favorite go. He's not going to break the bank. Small risk, huge reward, in my opinion. I don't think the issue right now with Nick Chubb, it's just my guess, just take it with a grain of salt. I don't think the issue right now with Nick Chubb is that the Browns don't want to bring him back. I think the question with Nick Chubb is he's waiting to see what his market looks like to try to get the best offer possible from the Cleveland Browns. And right now, I don't think a market has materialized yet, which is why we've been waiting. That's my guess, right? Because I think the energy I get from all of this, the Browns have had a deal worked out, the framework of a deal worked out. This whole thing has been about letting Nick Chubb hit the market. Nobody's really been that interested in Nick Chubb. So I think they're letting Nick Chubb see what the market is. They have a deal in place if there's no market that forms for Nick Chubb. And I think the Browns are ready to match to a point if somebody does offer Nick Chubb something. But I think what we are waiting on isn't the Browns to make a decision. It is the Chubb's camp to figure out what the market is for him and to try to maximize whatever deal they can get based on what these offers are. And I think we'll know what the market truly is for Nick Chubb after the draft. And I think that's when things are going to start rolling downhill when it comes to Nick Chubb. So, something to keep in mind there, right? I know a lot of people are looking at it as the Browns aren't trying to bring back Nick Chubb. I don't think it's that. I think both these parties want to return to the Cleveland Browns. It's just a matter of like, hey, what's fair value for me at the position right now based on what the market is? And right now it's been hard to get a read on that from Nick Chubb's side and from the Browns side. So they're letting that whole thing, I think, play out. Go Explorer Ohio says, who would you be more interested in trading back into the mid-second to get? So trading back into the mid-second from like the third. Okay. The Browns have some really good draft capital in the third and fourth. So it seems like they have a good opportunity to move up and grab a high-quality guy that slips given the opportunity. If one of those tackles falls, what would be within range for 67? Let's say you get to like pick like the late 50s and Josh Simmons or Josh Connerly, one of the Joshes at left tackle, are still on the board. I think you trade up to go get him. I think that makes a ton of sense there. Those are the guys there. Maybe Travion would be somebody you're willing to move up for. Maybe Caleb Johnson would be somebody you're willing to move up for. You want to either get a left tackle, a premium position, and a player you coveted at that premium position, or you want to get an explosive player who can create explosives. I think those are two most important things to try to grab there. If you can get that by moving up from 67, I think that's good business. Big Griff says, been loving the vids. If we take a quarterback at 33, would that completely take us out of next year's draft? I like Milro a lot, and I think the development with him would be great in the right system. But if we draft him and he doesn't play at all, we'll have a chance to end up within range of either drafting or trading up for a much better prospect. I wouldn't want to miss on a guy like Klubnik or Sellers, who I think could have a much higher ceiling than Milro. Yeah, this is the dilemma, right, with drafting a quarterback at all in this draft, right? You have to consider, do I believe in this guy enough that I'm willing to just take him versus taking the opportunity to possibly be available for Cade Klubnik or Lenore Sellers? That's the $1 million question, right? That's why this job is hard and why Andrew Berry's job is very hard, right? Like it's not obvious because you could say, hey, I'm going to bet on Cade Klubnik and Lenore Sellers, but maybe you bet on them and they play too good and they're out your range and you don't get a chance to get them and you don't get Milro and you don't get Cade and you don't get Lenore's. Or you bet on these guys and Cade and Lenore's don't have great years and Lenore stays in college, or, Cade doesn't have a great year and, it doesn't look like as good as a bet anymore. This is why the job is hard and why the Browns position is not an easy one to solve, because these are the questions you have to answer here. But yeah, that's the big dilemma. If you take quarterback at 33, you are saying this is the guy. Unless you end up with like the number 1 overall pick next year, you're going to be sticking with Jaylen Milro if you take him at 33 through 2025 to 2026. And there's a chance that you might stick with it to 2027, because as much as people want to act like, 50 starts is too many starts to give him or whatever it is, there are a lot of guys who take forever to actually demonstrate that they can be a franchise quarterback. Baker Mayfield is a prime example of that, right? Took him to like year 5 or 6 to put together 2 good seasons, or start the run that he put together 2 good seasons. And you don't want to be in a position where you give up on Jaylen Milro early. He goes somewhere else and you're like, oh man, we gave up on him too early when you spent a 2nd round pick on him. Like, you got to see it out all the way, and you don't know what that development's going to look like, because it's not going to be linear, right? Jaylen Milro's not going to just look completely terrible all the time, or he's not going to look completely amazing all the time and answer all of your questions. There's going to be ups and downs to it, right? There's going to be times where you're like sold on the Jaylen Milro thing, and then times where you're just absolutely not sold on the Jaylen Milro thing. It's going to be a process. It is going to take patience, and you can't really force it on a timeline. So, and that's the job. That's why it's difficult, right? That's why none of this shit is easy that the Browns have to deal with. You know what I mean? So I think it's definitely something you have to consider. What if the Browns draft Ashton Genty? What would your reaction be? Could that be a classic LOL Browns moment that might actually end up well? AB talking about Milro and Lamar got me thinking about the next Derrick Henry. If you're laughing at a team for drafting Ashton Genty, you are online too much. Like, no disrespect, but Ashton Genty's a phenomenal football player. And whatever team and whatever fan base drafts him is gonna love him. So the idea of like laughing at a team because they took Ashton Genty simply because he plays running back and all the internet football nerds don't think that drafting a running back is silly. Just tells me it's time for somebody to touch grass. And I'm not saying that's you, Stat3215. I'm just saying, like, anybody whose first reaction would be LOL Browns, how stupid, how could they draft one of the top 3 players in the draft at pick number 2? It's like, It's like, okay, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Ashton Genty's going to be a phenomenal football player. Will it work out the best long term? I don't know, but you know what? People tend to not regret drafting good players, right? Like all this shit people talk about positional value and age and all of that. If the player you draft is good, all that other shit does not matter. Nobody cares, right? They took Saquon Barkley number 2 overall in New York. And they don't regret drafting him number 2 overall. They just regret not extending him. And you can say, oh, we could have had Josh Allen. We could have had Lamar Jackson. They didn't take it. They took Saquon Barkley. And you ask Giants fans, they're more upset about not keeping Saquon Barkley versus drafting him at 2. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think if anybody's first reaction, if the Browns take Ashton Genty, is to laugh at him. I think my first reaction is to laugh at that person because I'm like, oh, you've been online so much that you've lost the plot about football, because at the end of the day, Ashton Genty's a dude you can put the football in his armpit and he can take you to a win. You love having those kind of players on your team. You know what I mean? Like, and I wouldn't get too caught up in what terminally online football fans feel about the positional value of what you did there too. Draft good players. And if that dude's a playmaker, nobody gives a fuck about any of that other stuff, man. Dead serious. Nobody cares. Nobody cares at all about any of that other stuff. Who you could have had here or there. If the dude is good, the dude is good. Let's go George Lewis here. Why isn't anybody in the national media talking about Milro to the Browns? Do you think they trade back into the first to get him? Here's my theory. I think there's a chasm, right? I think there is what the public thinks about where Jaylen Milro is going to get drafted, and I think there is what the NFL thinks about where Jaylen Milro is going to be drafted. They just dropped their draft attendance list, and Jaylen Milro is one of 2 quarterbacks invited to draft. Well, 3. Jackson Dart was invited. He has decided to not accept his invite, which is interesting, which, maybe his people aren't the most confident that Jackson Dart is going to go in the first round. And I would think that is a smart play by Jackson Dart's representation, because I don't think Jackson Dart's going to go in the first round. I'd be surprised. But hey, sometimes I get surprised, right? But he's one of 2 quarterbacks. The other one's Cam Ward. Jaylen Milro's the other guy that have not only been invited to the draft, but are confident enough in their ability to go in the first round that they've accepted the invite. And when you talk to people who aren't really like assigned to a team or anything like that, right? Like the people like me and you, people like scouts and people who scout for websites, I think the tendency is to focus on Jaylen Milro's tape and what he is, right? But when you talk to coaches and scouts for NFL teams, the focus isn't what that player is right now. It's what that player could be. And Jaylen Milro, to a lot of people, has the highest potential in this draft class. He's the youngest quarterback in the draft class. And all of the intangibles about him, being able to be coachable and developmental, off the charts. All of the physical abilities of Jaylen Milro, off the charts. That is a player that teams are going to value much more than the internet. And I do wonder if part of why we're not hearing a ton from the national media about Jaylen Milro to the Browns is because there might be more energy for teams to take Milro in the first round, or there might be a chance that Milro goes way earlier than we think. I've floated out a couple of them, right? I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers surprised us and took Jalen Milro. I wouldn't be surprised if the Dallas Cowboys surprised us and took Jalen Milro or something like that, right? Like, there are a lot of teams with quarterbacks who are getting older and more expensive who look and say, hey, we got time, we got a good franchise, we got good coaches, we can develop this guy, right? Detroit might look at a Jalen Milro and say, we'll take a chance with him. I don't think it's a guarantee that you can just sit at 33 and get Jalen Milro, because that is a dude that, from everything I know, coaches are going to love and GMs are going to fall in love with the upside. You know, if somebody gets drafted way earlier than we're anticipating, it's Jalen Milro, right? He could be the Michael Penix of the class, where everybody knew Michael Penix was going to go in the second round last year. But then you get to pick 10 and Atlanta takes him. Maybe the 49ers do something similar. You know, maybe the Rams do something similar. He's kind of the Jordan Love of this draft class, right? Where Jordan Love surprised people by going in the first round. People thought he was a clear second round prospect, but they're not looking at what that guy is. What Jalen Milro is on tape is a top 40 pick, is a guy who should be there at 33. What Jalen Milro could be can easily be justified with a mid to late first round pick. So that is the big question, I think, looming for the draft. We know that the Browns are going to either be able to draft Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, right? That's going to be an option on the board for the Browns. The question is that, like, hey, how aggressive, if you love Jalen Milro, do you get for Jalen Milro? Because I wouldn't sit back and assume that all of these teams that have quarterbacks that have the opportunity to allow Jalen Milro to develop are just going to pass on him. I wouldn't assume that at all. I wouldn't feel comfortable assuming that at all. There's energy to take this dude in first round. And what I do feel like is absolutely true is that Jalen Milro is going to go in the top 40 picks. Like, if he falls to the second, it ain't going to be that long. Hell, I don't know if he gets past Cleveland. He definitely doesn't get past New York. So that dude's the demand on Jalen Milro, I think, is a lot higher than I think some people think, because we go on these mock draft boards, right? And we play these mock draft machines, and PFF has him at 57, and, you know, all the other boards have him like 40, and you get used to he's always there in the second round, or you get used to maybe he's there at 67. And that kind of paints what you feel like the demand is going to be for Jalen Milro. It's why every time I draft the guy at 33, there's somebody in the comment section saying, hey, that's a reach. Jalen Milro at 33, that's a reach. It's not a reach. Jalen Milro is absolutely a top 40 pick. It's just the internet, I think, is lower on him than NFL teams are, because the internet is more focused about what he is on tape versus what you think you can mold him into and the probability of what coaches think is going to be possible with him. And this is a guy Nick Saban raves about, so I imagine coaches are going to love him. But that's it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.